afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and hope you're having a great Ignite so far. I've had a really amazing time. Yesterday, really high energy, great information, great announcements. I hope today has also followed the same trajectory for you all. Thank you for taking the time to come have this great conversation with us. At this time today, we're going to be talking about unlocking AI by assessing your app and data estates to power that AI innovation. My name is Ikenna Okeke, and I lead product marketing for app modernization here at Microsoft Azure. And I'm joined by my very good friends and colleagues.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gaurav Seth, and I'm a product manager on Azure App Services team.
Hey, guys. Jibson Mamerto here. I'm a solution architect at Cast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Today, we really want to dive into this conversation on assessment, right? Like you've heard all through Ignite, from Satya's keynote to multiple breakout sessions, we're really in an era, in an age where AI is really transforming how we live our lives, the way we interact with technologies, the way we interact with each other. And the very significant thing that we're seeing across all our customer engagements and across the industry is customers are now thinking through, customers like yourself are now thinking through, how do we scale this innovation? How do we scale this technology across our enterprise? And one thing that is really clear is AI is no longer something that we're supposed to be looking forward to in the future. It is here. It is already happening. And we have lots of customers who had started with testing out and piloting AI use cases, and now they're thinking, how do we move this to production? And Microsoft, being that we've been on this long journey of modernization, and we've been engaged with customers in multiple modernization projects, in partnership with Forrester, we really wanted to understand, how do we help enterprises embark on this journey, adopt this technology in a way that is risk-free, and they're able to harness and get the full benefits of their investments. And we went ahead to survey 500 companies globally just to identify key traits and key characteristics that were really significant to enabling these companies adopt generative AI as soon as it hits mainstream. And three main things were spotted. The first one is the fact that these companies had a very clear technology strategy built around AI and training. The second piece is, it wasn't just technology for technology's sake. There was a clear business outcome that they were trying to drive, so there was a need that they were trying to solve, and that need drove every single investment they made toward their modernization effort. And then the third piece is an upgraded technology stack backed by deep strategic partnership with your technology providers. But then one thing that we always hear right from the advent of the cloud is people would say to you, oh, modernization equals slow. Modernization is slow, so I just want to move. Just migrate me to the cloud, and every other thing would fall in place. But if there is one thing I want us to take out of this conversation today, and you would hear my colleagues speak about this, modernization doesn't equal slow. And with the right process, the right tools, the right methodology, and the right partnership, we can actually help you move your projects forward way more and seamlessly. Through all our engagements and even with the learnings that we've done as a cloud provider with Microsoft ourselves, we've been on this journey, like I mentioned. We've been on this journey for a very long time, and we've realized that to have and harness the value of your modernization efforts, it requires having this constant flywheel of optimization, this constant flywheel of improvement that goes through a very programmatic approach, starting with assessing your app and data estate, which is what we're going to be going into today. And in this session, you would hear how we support our customers, both from a first-party point of view and the third-party partnerships we also offer as a cloud provider to enable you have this clear line of sight across your estate so you know exactly how to move your projects forward. And the key theme here is accelerating and executing a very successful modernization project requires thinking about your projects in a very stepwise way, going through that entire life cycle. And as you continue to establish this continuous flywheel of optimization and improvement, you start to see even the rewards and the benefits grow exponentially. Now, Azure really makes this easy for you to go from code to cloud, providing you with a comprehensive set of tools and services to enable you not just only modernize, but have both your app and your data co-located on the same platform to have that improved resiliency, to have that increased agility. Also backed by industry-led security, just so that your team, your customers, and your applications are secure from code to cloud. And also backed by the best developer tools that help your developers stay productive and stay very effective. We, in conjunction with our ecosystem of partners, provide this comprehensive support to ensure that you have a successful and a seamless modernization project. I will now pass on the mic to my colleague, Gaurav, to take us through our first-party offerings. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thanks, Ikenna. So with that, let's start looking at what are the different migration and modernization tools that are available from Microsoft. So I'm going to start with the whole Azure Migrate tooling that's available with us. So when we talk about Azure Migrate, I mean, what it helps you is helps you assess your entire app and data estate readiness with AI. So it's basically AI-assisted assessment for your data and app estate. Now, when I say it's AI-assisted, what we try and do for you is we give you the inventory, like in terms of how many virtual machines were there, how many web servers are there in your environment, how many database servers are there. In addition to that, we also give you deeper insights in your app and data. So we even tell you what kind of infrastructure is deployed on the web server or on the database server. Again, so you have all of this discovered information with a single pane of glass. We also give you a quick view into effort estimation. I mean, like, what would it take for you to go ahead and migrate or modernize some of these websites, web apps, or databases for that matter. And when we talk about toolings, we not only have these toolings which are pretty much freely available for you to use from Microsoft, we also have a lot of migration toolings available from our partners like Cast and Unify Cloud. Now, when we talk about Azure Migrate specifically, I mean, what it helps you is with portfolio assessment. So you can discover, assess, and migrate your web applications and databases. Again, on the migration front, just to clarify, it's more about the workloads that are still supported. Now, once you have done discovery, assessment, and migration, there will always be opportunity for you to get deep into your code assessment. And that is where, for almost a year or over a year, we have the Azure Migrate Code Assessment Toolkit. That's an extension available from Visual Studio Marketplace that pretty much even pinpoints what's the kind of code changes that may be required before you choose the target service on Azure. Now, what we have also been doing of late is we are trying to pivot Azure Migrate more towards application-aware assessments. And what I mean by application-aware assessments is the whole idea that applications don't exist standalone. They will always, or I should say mostly, be connected to a database or some kind of a backend and probably another external connectivity. And that is where we talk about application-aware assessments. We even give you a view into what's the connectivity. Is your application connected to a database? Is it connected to another external endpoint? So that's what we mean by application-aware experiences in Azure Migrate. With that, let me switch over to my demo machine. Yes. So that's how the whole Azure Migrate UX looks like. Now, from an Azure Migrate perspective, there's always a pre-step or a prerequisite to what you see on the screen. For you to start the whole discovery process, what you need to do is go ahead and download a virtual appliance, set it up on a virtual machine in your data center, Once that is done, it's more like just a one-time process. We start the whole discovery process. And as you can see here, we have discovered there are almost like more than 20,000 virtual machines in the environment, out of which we even go ahead and figure out how many SQL servers are there, how many IIS web servers are available in your environment. For example, if I even get deeper into these web servers, what we provide you is, again, deeper details about the whole infrastructure that's there on every individual server. So what's the IP address? What's the ports that are being used? What's the software inventory? And by software inventory, we mean here, what are the other applications that are installed on these virtual machines? What's the kind of other infrastructure in terms of the network or storage that's available on these machines? Now, once you're done with discovery, the next step in the journey is all about assessments. And to make a point about assessments, the assessments in this case are largely focused on configurations. So when I say configurations, the simplest example could be what port is your web application running? What's the protocol? What's the type of authentication that your web application is using? To do that, you get into assessments. And again, to create assessments, you can always customize the assessments to meet your needs and requirements. So you can always choose stuff like what region you plan to migrate, what's the kind of pricing plan you use. Do you need an isolated deployment for your web app? So these are all different parameters that you can choose while you are configuring assessments. Once the assessment is configured and it is completed, that's where we'll give you this report, which not only targets app service code, but we also give you, if you can move these web applications over to, because these are .NET web applications, can you move them over to Windows containers on Azure App Service? Now, if I get deeper into any of these reports, so if I see the report which is targeting app services code, we give you this whole categorization based on what, and again, it's for every individual web application. We'll tell you, is the web application not ready? Is it ready, or is it ready with conditions? Now, a ready web application typically means that the web application can just move fine to Azure App Service. Ready with conditions means that your web application can migrate to Azure App Service, but post-migration, there may be some configurational changes that are required. The best example I can give you is it is very common that your web application may not be on port 80 or 443 when it's on-prem. Maybe it's on port 8000. In that case, what would happen is web application, after the migration, the traffic would only be available on 80 and 443. So you might have to do some sort of like changes for any integrations that may break. So that's what I mean. But your web application will still migrate just fine. So those are some examples of ready with conditions. And when a web application is not ready, one of the primary reasons behind that could be the protocol that's being used. Because again, on Azure App Service, we support HTTP and HTTPS. Maybe your web application is using maybe an MSMQ protocol, for example. So let's look at some of the sample applications over here. If I see ready with conditions, you pretty much won't see an issue. What you'll see is warnings. So what we are telling you is that you're using an authentication that may not be available as is on App Service. Because again, for us who are coming from IIS web server background, it is very, very common that you'll have the Windows integrated authentication. Now, once you move to Azure App Service, you can still use Windows authentication, but then you can do it with your Enter ID. So that's the kind of change that you'll have to make. Similarly, we'll also give you a warning that probably this web application is not on port 80 and 443, so it will migrate, but you'll have to make some changes. If I go and look at a not ready web application, in this scenario, I will see that some issues have been reported. And again, as I said, it's largely to do with protocols. Now, once I am done with discovery and assessment, again, for supported workloads, right now that's .NET Web Application. Eventually, you can even migrate these web applications over to Azure App Service. What you do is you start the process by specifying the intent. So what am I trying to do? Where do I want to migrate? I want to migrate to ASP.NET Web Applications. What's my target? Is it code or containers? What kind of virtualization? And then eventually you select the assessment that you have already done. We'll pick up web applications from that assessment for you to migrate. So I select the assessment, I click on continue, and now what it is asking me to do is to select the subscription, the resource group that I want to migrate to, and then I click next. What we are going to do behind the scene is pull all the web applications over, and what you will see on the screen is that by default, we would actually again, that just proves I'm live. So yeah, I couldn't connect back to my backend at this moment, but yeah. But what would happen over here is that once I get the list of applications, by default applications which are ready would show up as green, and web applications which are ready with conditions will show up in amber. You can always go ahead and change them, because then they will migrate. Because as the architects and the developers, you know your applications best. So that's a choice that you make. Now, this is a journey more based on configuration. What, as I said, if you want to do a deep dive into the code for your web application, in that scenario, as I said, there is a Visual Studio Marketplace extension. It's called Azure Migrate Code Application and Assessment Toolkit. You go ahead, download the assessment, install it. Once you've done that, you'll start seeing a new option. It's called Replatform to Azure. You click that. If you've already done it, you can open a report. In my case, I'll just go ahead and select a new report. And for me, the target is App Services Windows. I'll select it, and then it will give you the list of projects which are there in this solution. I click Next. Now again, I can only do source code or settings, or I could include binaries if I want to. I'll click on Analyze. Now, within a matter of seconds, what this gives you is a dashboard in terms of the issues that we have identified. Now, those could be mandatory, something that you should fix before you migrate. Those could be optional or potential. Optional means if you don't fix, they'll still work fine. Potential is that once you migrate, they may cause an issue to you. So let's go and look at some of these issues. For example, if you see the mandatory issue that's being reported is that this application is actually using Windows authentication. As I said a while back, that this application can migrate, but it will not work with integrated Windows authentication on Azure App Service. Now, how does the whole power of AI come into picture? So that is where we have integrated this extension with GitHub Copilot chat extension. I can simply click Ask Copilot. And what the Copilot would now do is it identifies the issue, and it will even come back and give you suggestions or even code block that you might have to change so that this issue can be mitigated. As you can see here, it is telling you the bunch of things that you may have to do, like go ahead, go over to your web.config file, just remove Windows authentication, set it to none, and that's how you can update your code. So that's how easy it gets for you. Let's look at another issue. In this case, what it's telling me is this is an optional issue because I am using probably an older data library, and if I upgrade to a newer data library, I mean, it supports me better in terms of different authentication schemes, like around managed identities. I can again click Ask Copilot, and what Copilot does now is it again does the same identification of the issue, even gives you the code block, gives you what's the package reference you should be including. So you can see here it tells me what's the package reference I need to include. It then tells you what's the directive that you need to change in this specific class, and what's the code block that you need to change. So that's the power of AI right in front of you when it comes even to your source code assessment and the suggestions that that come back from GitHub Copilot in terms of how you can modernize these web applications. Now let me head over to the app that I have already migrated. So what I just showcased was how we are using the power of AI to help you migrate and modernize your web application. But for Azure App Service as a platform, we ourselves are also using a lot of AI capabilities behind the scene. And recently, we've introduced this whole capability called as AI-powered diagnostics. So Some of you, if you have used the diagnose and solve problem experience in Azure App Service, using that, we help you troubleshoot your web applications. What we have done now is we have taken the experience to next level. We are using the power of conversational diagnostics to help you troubleshoot your web application better. And there are like some pre-canned queries that you can, or rather prompts that you can ask, or you can even type your own prompt. So I can just ask a simple question: what are the application resiliency features that I can include with my web application? And what it does, it comes back and again gives me a lot of these suggestions, telling me I can enable a custom auto heal, or I can simply go ahead and enable a health check feature, which is all about heartbeats for your web application. So these are, again, this is, again, using the power of AI behind the scenes. So it's like we are using the power of AI to help you migrate and modernize your web application. And then also on a platform level, we are using the Gen AI conversational diagnostics capabilities. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Jibson.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you.
All right, let's just go here. All right. Hello again, everyone. It's been a few minutes, so I'll introduce myself again. My name is Jibson, and I'm a solution architect at Cast. So today, my goal is to talk to you about Cast, who we are, a little bit about what we do, and what solutions we have to offer. More importantly, how we can help with this topic that we're talking about here today around assessments of our applications, our application estate. And we've heard from our colleagues that sometimes that can be difficult, that can be challenging. So I want to kind of illustrate to you how we can help with that. So a little bit about Cast. Cast has been around for 30 years, so certainly not a new company. What we do is software intelligence, right? So for those of you not familiar with the term, software intelligence is the insights that we can get from our applications by assessing their source code. Right, so to put it simply, we have solutions at Cast that scan the source code of applications and provide various insights that can be helpful for modernization, assessments, and so forth. So over the next few minutes, I hope to illustrate to you how those insights can be very helpful, again, for the assessment, a thorough assessment of our estate. I want to start with some of the challenges. Right, so we talked about some of the complexities around modernization, around assessments. We certainly have a point of view in that, right? With the work that we've done with our customers, what we're finding is that there is this notion of analysis paralysis. So in other words, there's a lack of information, or perhaps too much of the irrelevant information to really make informed decisions about applications, what to do with the applications, and their optimal pathways for modernization. And this tends to be a little bit more challenging as the portfolio gets bigger. And this uncertainty certainly leads to hesitation, right, to take action on these applications, take action on the modernization initiatives. And the modernization itself is, depending on who you ask, can be defined in different ways. And it's not always clear what modernization path is best for given applications. And it's also difficult to align, between various groups, various stakeholders, in terms of the priorities and the way forward for the applications. So how do we help with this, right? So we have two solutions at Cast. Again, as I mentioned, these are based on software intelligence. So both of these solutions are analyzing the source code of the applications. The first solution is called Cast Highlight. So Cast Highlight is more of a portfolio-minded solution. So it was designed with the portfolio in mind. The idea here is we scan the applications within our portfolio that's in scope of the assessment. And as you can see here, listed on the left, some of the insights that would come out of that analysis. So we're looking at the overall health of the applications, the cloud disposition of the application, so how cloud ready or cloud mature are the applications. We're looking at the risks associated with third-party components that are being used by those applications. So think of it as a control tower, a centralized location for all of these insights across the portfolio of applications. Okay. The second solution, cast imaging, a slightly different intent here. The goal of imaging through the analysis of the source code is to provide a visual representation of that application. So over on the right there, you can see sort of a blueprint, if you will, of the architecture of the application. And the idea here is that being able to kind of investigate, explore the different objects, the relationships between these objects within the application can accelerate the understanding of that application. And the more understanding, the more confident we are with the decision-making process on what to do with these applications. So I'll stop there, and I will dig a little bit more in terms of the demo here. Let me just log back in real quick. All right. Okay. So let's start with Cast Highlight. As I mentioned, this is our portfolio-focused solution. And this is our demo environment, and you can see that we've scanned and analyzed 235 applications in this portfolio. So certainly not a small portfolio of applications, not the largest at the same time. But as I mentioned, the goal with Highlight is to scan the applications within the portfolio and deliver the insights that might be relevant for us when it comes to planning, modernization, and so forth. So in fact, you can see there's these 4 tiles that do a pretty good job of summarizing the different types of insights that we can produce. As I mentioned, there's the assessment around the software health. So we're looking at non-best practices, best practices within the source code of the application to determine the health of the application. We're looking at what we call the cloud maturity or the cloud readiness. So this is assessing how cloud native or how cloud ready are your applications. There's again, the open source risk. So the risk associated with using third-party components, and more importantly, the vulnerabilities that may be associated with those components. And then there's the software health take on green. So focusing on rules, non-best practices associated with efficient programming principles. Okay? So this is, again, I mentioned the term control tower, right? So this is bringing together in one central location all of the insights that are relevant for our application. It's also a way for us to quickly get answers about our portfolio. So for instance, here I can click on that little tile that indicates 52 million lines of code have been assessed, analyzed through our portfolio. And what we can see here is actually a breakdown of the different technologies that have been detected. So again, a very easy way, very quick way for us to just determine what is the technology, what are the programming languages that we're using within our portfolio. We're seeing the usual suspects here, the Javas and the C#, but perhaps the organization may be surprised to see that they have some Cold Fusion and some COBOL as well. So again, a very quick way to get answers. Now, typically when we're doing an assessment, there's typically it's part of a bigger initiative, like we're talking about here, a migration or modernization. It's usually anchored by something. So in those cases, we can actually dig in deeper in some of these areas. So when it comes to modernization, migration, we can click into our cloud maturity, and we see an advisor for cloud. And what we've done here is we've taken those 235 applications. Based on the analysis of the source code, we can automatically segment and make recommendations as to the optimal migration or modernization pathway for those applications. So for instance, here we can see that there's a small number of applications, 22, that we're recommending for a rehost. So that suggests that in the initial stage, maybe it's better to actually lift and shift this particular application and then modernize once we're in Azure. The 166 being recommended for refactor, however, because we've only found low critical blockers for cloud, this actually suggests that these applications are a good candidate for containerization. So in fact, the suggestion here is to refactor right away or as a first step as part of the migration or modernization to Azure. And then you'll see some other recommendations here for the re-architect, rebuild, retire, And you might recognize this as kind of the Gartner 5R model. Okay? So this is a way for us to provide an overall kind of, what to do with our applications for a software leader, an enterprise architect, and so forth. Now, there's another aspect to this as well, and that's around the sequencing or the prioritization, right? There's not unlimited budget, there's not unlimited bandwidth, so we need to know kind of where to start with our modernization migration process. So in this top right chart here, what we can actually do is hone in on a cluster of applications that we would define as our quick wins. So these are applications that are generally healthier based on the technical analysis. They're a little bit more cloud ready, more cloud mature, but at the same time, they're also lower on the business criticality. So in other words, they're easier to deal with, and they're also lower risk. So then the idea is we fine-tune our process. We start with this cluster, but we make our way counterclockwise and address the remaining applications, right, within our portfolio. So again, this is giving us almost a roadmap for our modernization and migration initiative. Now, if we wanted to understand our applications even further, now this is kind of our portfolio aspect, our portfolio view that we've been focused on here. We have the ability to also deep dive into the application itself, right? So we'll stick to our modernization migration theme here and look at the cloud maturity insights of our application. So this particular one is called Roswell. It's one of the applications that have been scanned in our portfolio. And what you see in the cloud maturity insights is this notion of cloud blockers and boosters, right? So blockers are things that we're identifying that could slow down or hinder the transition of this particular application to more cloud native, right? So you can see some of the blockers here. To better understand what these blockers are, why we're identifying them as blockers, and what the remediation recommendations are. Each one of these is going to have a knowledge base that explains all of that information. You can see as well additional metadata that suggests the criticality, the impact, and more importantly, there is the metadata around the prevalence of these blockers. So we can actually identify to you the specific files that we've identified that has a dependency on system DLLs, for example. And this is important. Let's say if we're trying to containerize this application, we need to address these DLLs. We need to register them on the container to make sure the application continues to work. Blockers are the opposite. Blockers are things that we want to see in the application that could accelerate the transition to cloud native. So these are mechanisms that are conducive to that. These are perhaps already Azure services that are being leveraged, and so forth. We're also seeing here, near the bottom of this page here, some recommendations around the services that may be suitable for this application. So it doesn't suggest that these need to be leveraged or used, but based on the technical analysis and based on the blockers and boosters that we've identified, these may be appropriate and should be considered for the applications. Okay? So that was CAST highlight, and just to quickly summarize, we kind of started with the portfolio aspect, doing a full analysis of the 235 applications. We used our cloud advisor to kind of help us build a roadmap for our migration or modernization. And lastly here, we've actually gone in deeper and looked at the specific insights for an application to understand it a little bit better. Okay? So now I want to transition over to CAST imaging. So this is the second solution that I introduced a little bit earlier on. And so if we think about our journey so far, we've gone ahead and identified a small set of applications that we may want to start with in terms of our modernization. We took a closer look at one application in CAST highlight, but there are scenarios where we might want to learn a little bit more. Okay, and then this is really where CAST imaging can really help. So this is a single application that's been analyzed in CAST imaging, and as I mentioned before, this is based on the source code analysis of that application. And this is the output of that analysis. It's a visual representation of our application. And this particular view that we're looking at is the highest level view. It's a very abstract view. All we're really seeing here is the tiering of the application. We can see a UI representation, business and business logic services here, and as well as the data layer. But as you can see, we can actually zoom in. And as we zoom in, we see a little bit more details of each layer of the application. And then ultimately, we'll get to our level 5 view where we can actually see the full technology architecture blueprint of this application. Okay? So for instance, if maybe our modernization focus is going to be on the UI elements of this particular application, we can see all of our cluster of ASPX pages that represent the UI and all of the artifacts that support that ASPX page. We can also see down below here the business logic of this application. We can see the cluster of C# classes as an example here that hold a lot of the logic for this application. And then finally, we can actually see the communication or the interaction between the application source code and the data layer, which is our SQL Server database. Okay? Now, if we wanted to learn more, if we wanted to dig in a little bit deeper, we can certainly do that by expanding either the objects that we see on our screen here or the relationships between the objects. So for instance, if I wanted to investigate further the cluster of C# classes that exists within my application, I can expand that node and view all of the C# classes, their dependencies on each other, whether it's an inheritance of classes, inheritance of interfaces, or maybe it's a method-to-method call between classes. Okay? Or alternatively, I can also expand relationships between the objects. So for instance here, I want to understand a little bit better why there is a reference between my cluster of C# classes and my tables, my database tables directly. I can actually expand this link here and pinpoint the exact class as well as the 3 tables that are being referenced by that class. And if we wanted to learn more, we can actually click on this particular class and view the source code of this application. And so if we scroll down a little bit here, we can actually see that there's an embedded SQL here, and that is the reason why there is a relationship between this class and the 3 tables that you're seeing there. Okay? So this is just kind of one example of how you might want to investigate the application within imaging. I wanted to show an example of how deep we can go in terms of the details that we can surface on the view here. But we're just scratching the surface here. There's lots of different scenarios that we can leverage imaging for, whether it's, perhaps it's a rewrite of the application, perhaps it's a rebuild to a microservices architecture, or a database migration. Lots of different use cases. The one thing I will say before I hand it over to my colleague Ikenna is, when talking about AI, AI models, LLMs, they really like graphing databases or graphing information. So, consider taking the outputs of imaging, which is objects, relationships, and so forth, and using that as an input to LLM or AI for whatever use case it may be. Maybe it's just a better understanding of the application, or maybe we're doing some type of code conversion or microservice automatic extraction and so forth. Okay? Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jibson. Okay, so you've all heard all of this goodness. There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot that we can offer. And what we've been able to show here is you don't necessarily need to go through this all by yourself. The modernization projects, like we all know, can be very daunting. But then you don't have to embark on this journey yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, a strategic partnership really helps move that forward, and that's what we offer to you. Through our partnership with you, Microsoft also offers you, our customers, an unlimited access to leverage either Azure Migrate, Cast, or Unify Cloud to run your assessments. Because again, your modernization efforts would start from understanding the landscape of your digital estate, your app, your data. Because in order to take advantage of AI, you need to get that infrastructure ready such that you're able to move in a way that is risk-free and scalable. So across the entire modernization lifecycle, from assessment to planning, down to the point of executing and operationalizing at scale, and even skilling, we provide you with a really comprehensive set of resources to enable you embark on this journey successfully. Now, if you're thinking of how to learn more, and if you have more questions around how to leverage CAST with your assessment, my colleague Jibson would be at the expert meetup area on the 3rd level right after this session. So feel free to come by. It's the Java and .NET app modernization booth on the app area. And you will find my colleague Jibson there, and he can answer all the questions you have. Also at 4:15 today, we would, in the Theater A, also on the 3rd level, we will be showing the capabilities from Unify Cloud, another partner we also provide you to run your assessment. And here, we're giving you options. You can choose whichever one is most convenient for you to use in your projects. And how can you access all of this? All through this program. If you scan the QR code, go to Azure Innovate, nominate your program in there. All the offerings, the funding, the assessment resources, the expert resources, you would get it through this program. And recently, just at Ignite, we also launched a 3rd offering, which is Azure Essentials. And with Azure Essentials, you have this full pool of tools to enable you run your workloads at scale, make them resilient, make them reliable, and ensuring that they are actually set up right on the cloud, such that you have this strong center of excellence running on the cloud, so that you're able to make the most of your resource. So feel free, leverage all of those resources, and we're happy to keep interacting with you. If you have questions, we're happy to take them now. Else, you will find us on the 3rd level at the app modernization booth. Feel free, come say hi. We want to learn about your projects. We want to learn about your concerns. We're here to support you as much as possible. Thank you so much for your time. We'll take questions if you have any else. We're happy to give you time back.